Well, good morning and welcome to this live Financial Mail Red Zone in discussion with live event. I'm Arya Kelman. This morning we're talking seasonal strategies, the impact of spring, summer, autumn and winter on advertising, live with our esteemed panel. Speaking of which, the people we'll be hearing from this morning are Mongezi Mtati, lead brand strategist at Roger Wilco, Lebo Muerane, social and digital lead at VML YNR, Taniko Mageza, Executive Head of Marketing at the V&A Waterfront, and Krista Kruger, Chief Operating Officer at Wavemaker. So to contextualize our discussion this morning, every year, as we know, presents a truth, and that is that consumers are inclined to spend more money during certain periods and less during others, depending on the products and services in question. So as a marketer, how does one gear efforts around the peaks and troughs of consumer behavior to deliver a strong year-long marketing strategy from January's New Year's resolutions to the rush of Black Friday shopping and the festive period? That's what we're solving for this morning, and we are taking your questions live in the chat. So let's get into this. Let me kick it off with you, Taniko, because I know what marketing is, but now you've thrown this word seasonal marketing in. What are we speaking about this morning? What is seasonal marketing?
Well, good morning, Arya. Thank you for having us. It's such a pleasure, especially after a long weekend. So forgive me because I have not topped up on my English data bundle. So if I'm a little bit slow, please forgive me. But the way I understand and define seasonal marketing is actually a practice that I would say most marketers engage in. And it's the process of crafting and designing marketing campaigns around a particular season. And I mean, you've spoken about the seasons in like the traditional sense, like summer, winter, autumn, spring, which in the Cape Town context happens pretty much in one day. But you can probably take that like one step further because there's category specific seasonality. So seasonality that is based on the ebb and flow of demand within a category. Seasonality could also be defined by days and periods of cultural significance. It could be religious holidays. It could be public holidays. So the intention is to augment your core marketing plan by leveraging and capitalizing in quite an opportunistic way on these particular days and using them as an opportunity to drive your brand objectives, whether it is your brand narrative or it could be and is most likely to be volume driven, like sales volume driven. And it's a really nice practice to think of it as an amplifier of your core marketing plan because it allows for there to be a consistent pipeline of activity throughout the year. So that's how I define it.
And Mongezi, I mean, Taniko is looking at this as if it's an incredible opportunity, which it certainly is, because it kind of gives a limited time offer or a limited time message to a consumer, which inspires kind of immediate action. There's the age-old adage that the only thing that kills sales or deals, whether that's for toothpaste or whether that's for something like a car, is time. The longer you think about it, the less likely you are to do it. So it almost puts in a contextualizer around limited time in which to do something or to take an action or making that product resonate within a specific kind of time frame and period in the year. So let's talk about the opportunity around it, the opportunity around limited time offerings for consumers and limited time messages. What opportunity do the different seasons and the different ebbs and flows of the year present to marketers?
I think I'll start off with partly what Taniko mentioned. It's that because it's meant to drive sales, the one big opportunity really is to drive those sales in a seasonal, through the seasonal messaging. It also creates the sense of premiumization that because I can only get this at this time, it's premium at this time, which adds to this psychology of scarcity that comes with that there's a lot of this particular product right now, or at least it will be scarce following this time. And this psychology of scarcity then changes your priorities from I was going to buy this pair of sneakers next month, but suddenly it's on special now, so let me buy it now and postpone another buy. So it creates this kind of tension within us, but also it creates the psychology of scarcity, that something is scarce at that time and you are the only one who can get it at that rate at that particular time. What we've also noted over time is that people are buying things, are buying gifts or for gift giving seasons at times of special. So they would buy on Black Friday for Christmas. They would buy on a spring sale for Christmas. So they know that a birthday is coming up, so they buy now for later. So it creates this. So those are some of the opportunities that it creates for brands, especially.
It's almost taking me back to being a kid, and there's a different toy with the Happy Meal, and you've got basically like 2-3 weeks to get that Happy Meal, to get that specific toy. It's this idea of scarcity and things living in a specific space and time. But when you're looking at 365 days of a year, Krista, and you're planning for that year ahead, this really kind of throws, this feels like a lot of added pressure and a lot of added stress, because now you got to look at the entire calendar. You got to look at what different people are feeling and thinking at different times, and you have to shift and gear everything you do in and around that. I know that in the past several years, the advent of Black Friday has thrown a lot of marketers off their traditional Christmas festive push and actually made them reinvest a lot of that energy into Black Friday, because from a consumer perspective in terms of spending, it's really risen and almost surpassed Christmas in some categories. So how does one go about gearing your efforts based on these seasons? And how much attention should you pay to where people are at different times in the year? Will you fail without doing this?
I think an important part of your question was the consumer behavior, right? Understanding firstly, really your audience first, and make sure that yes, they might be spending more during the peak times, but what are they doing off peak times? They might not be investing at that stage, but they might be understanding, and they might be looking towards understanding a little bit more information. Are they gathering online? Are they researching? So firstly, it's really understanding, what your consumer is doing. But then the reality is that occasions is obviously driving spikes in media consumption. And as a team, you need to plan ahead for that. You need to make sure that you can capitalize, and have meaningful content during those times. The flip side, I guess, is that during key occasions, it's driving a lot of clutter. So as from a media point of view, it is understanding category clutter. What does it mean for investment purposes? I know that some FMCG brands are actually spending, gearing 40% of their budgets during Q4, October to December. So it's ensure that your communication is distinctive, it's well branded during those times, but also ensuring that you drive meaningful messages, which is really key.
So Lebo, there used to be, the good old days where the brand would say to you, just post it on social media. Now with the advent and the progression and the propulsion of social media, now the brand manager says, I need you to post this at our peak engagement time. And what is our peak engagement time? And is there a difference between us taking this live on a Tuesday versus a Thursday? Or if we do this on Thursday, just before Good Friday, are we not going to get any traction? Are people even on their phones during Easter weekend? There's so many questions that start coming into this mix. So when we look at kind of social media as a channel to communicate different times of the year, is social media just now at a stage where it's always on, or are there peaks and troughs in terms of how people consume social media as well? And the second part of that question is what has the COVID lens done to all of that? Because obviously now everyone thinks, and you'll tell us if we're right or wrong, people are far more digitally inclined than they are reality inclined, given what COVID has done from a consumer behavioral perspective. But Where is it at when it comes to social and the peaks and troughs of that based on the time of the year?
I mean, social in its nature is very, very tactical, right? I mean, it's your leisure kind of platform. You use it when you want to sort of just de-stress or look at what your friends are doing. So there is a bit of an ebb and flow in general, you know, even on a weekly basis. And it's also category specific and also brand specific. So fashion and lifestyle tends to, you'll see a lot more activity on certain days. And then with sort of more sort of B2B, you'll see activity during the week, during business hours. So there is a bit of an ebb and flow. And I think one thing that's really interesting is that when you think about certain seasons like Festive, you're actually out and about with your friends. You're not like glued to your phone. You're taking pictures and you'll post them later, but you're not necessarily engaging with brand content. So it's something that brands also need to like understand that during those peaks where they want to really get in front of people, people are also living their lives during those particular times. So it gets a little bit tricky, right? So it's probably better to reach them at a time when a little bit before then, before they sort of go out and about and enjoy, you know, their families and having Easter lunches and things like that, when they're just about to sort of embark on those types of journeys. So there is a little bit of a tactical thing that you need to be busy with when it comes on to reaching people on social, because it's sort of just tied to the audience behavior and what they're doing offline as well.
Nico, let me come to you. I mean, the V&A is well established as possibly the singular most successful retail mixed-use development commercially in the country. And you have a specific task over and above perhaps what other brands have, in that you have audiences from South Africa who are celebrating South African things like Heritage Day, and you have audiences from overseas who are celebrating overseas things and who are on overseas holidays and who June means something different to. So when you look at the marketing strategy, how tailored does a strategy need to be to an individual group of people? And how do you decide where to put that weight? So am I going to try and connect with people overseas? Am I trying to connect with people locally? Am I trying to connect with a specific group of people locally? Is there a specific religious holiday that I think is going to really impact footfall? So how do you start making those kinds of decisions when you really look at the intricacies and the nuances of very individual consumer bases?
Yeah. So firstly, it's an acknowledgement that the waterfront is quite, as you've mentioned, we have a diverse mix of propositions. There's the shopping proposition, but you can live at the waterfront, you can eat at the waterfront, you can open up a business at the waterfront. So we kind of span between business to consumer and business to business, and as far as our segmentation is concerned. But overall, we see the waterfront as a neighborhood. It's actually an extension of the city of Cape Town. So where we anchor and position our most of our initiatives and most of our strategy is to locals, and creating authentic experiences and authentic propositions that are compelling for a local audience. We know that the waterfront does attract tourists, but for the most part, when you're traveling, any of us are traveling, you'll probably default to the places where the locals go. So creating locally authentic, really nuanced experiences that appeal to local audiences is both efficient, but also is the right thing to do, because I'm not going to, travel to, Switzerland and expect to see a safari when I could get it at home. So equally, when global audiences and global or international tourists visit South Africa, they're visiting for an authentic experience. So most of our activity is geared, from a seasonal perspective, is geared around creating and leveraging off of what matters to South Africans, what matters to locals, what will move them, what will be connect with them. And by doing that, then you create enriching experiences for people who come to the waterfront from all parts of the world. It's the same with our seasonal marketing campaigns. An example of that is in the festive season, for example, around Christmas. most malls will project a Christmas that is quite Eurocentric in nature. I mean, we're all used to seeing this like fake snow and reindeers, etc., etc. But we decided to take a different stance and rather think about Festive from a local perspective. It's hot in December. There ain't no reindeer. There's definitely no snow. So how do we project and capture a more authentic local South African Christmas that, irrespective of who you are, whether you are from Paris or Paris, you're experiencing something that is more true to who we are as a country and a continent.
Well, Ngezi, I want to pick up on this idea that Taniko is speaking about in terms of things being true and things being authentic. And, you know, we're living in a day and age where brands are under a major microscope. The primary microscope is called Twitter. And every single thing that they do is being analyzed by every single person that is on social media platforms or that sort of lives in the country, because everybody now has a voice to sort of talk back to brands. Whereas it used to be kind of this monologue, it's now this dialogue between the brand and the consumer, where the consumer can really get traction around their view on something. And very often, what we're seeing is that brands are trying to be all things to all people. So they're putting out a message to speak to every single South African possible religious holiday, or they're putting out a message to speak to every single possible thing that could affect every single possible South African demographic. And where does the role of kind of strategically saying, you know, what days are we going to weigh in on and what days are we not going to weigh in on? Where does that kind of come to the fore? Or how do you start making those decisions in a way that's going to benefit the brand? Because the worst thing to do is to try and be all things to all people. But I think that brands feel a pressure to be that because they're worried about being the one brand that isn't all things to all people. So it's a bit of a catch-22 that we find ourselves in. And in our context, where we have such a diverse array of cultures and religions and languages, there's a lot of things you can be to a lot of people. So how do you start making those decisions?
It's so what we've noted is that with some of the brands we work with, and there's this one in particular that has realized that their biggest segment is moms, is moms who shop at this particular place, right? So what we are noticing, and this is one example of a brand, what we are noticing is that brands are relying more and more on qualitative data. So they're trying to understand the customer as an individual or a customer base and also investing in understanding that customer and that customer base rather than going broad. So instead of going broad, brands are going deeper and deeper into understanding who their customer base or who their customer segment is. Of course, with representation in place and with considering the diversity of South Africa in place. But and that's one of the things that we are noticing, where they are noting that in as much as brands can go broad, they can also go a bit deeper into the understanding of that customer, and while focusing on some of these seasonal campaigns, they do so with that particular customer in mind. So I mean, there are quite a few of these examples. Nando's, for instance, is one such example where even in their language and the way that they speak on Twitter, you can tell that this is a particular South African of a certain age who is urban, lives a metropolitan lifestyle, and speaks in a particular way. This is mostly on Twitter. Again, in some instances, it's brands go social first, and the social doesn't match what you encounter at brand level when you go buy at a store or buy a product, which is a completely different experience. But this focus though on the South Africanness and who your customer is and who the customer is based on what the data tells you. I'm finding that more and more brands are more interested in what they get out of the data that customers give them, out of their engagement, and who's engaging with what kind of content. And then they're increasing that sort of content and using those to almost stress test their systems when holiday seasons come or when seasonal campaigns hit the market.
Krista, let me come to you because Mongezi's raising the age-old question, which is data versus gut. And in a media context and in a media planning context, I mean, there is an extensive amount of data that you can gather around a consumer. You can be very rest assured that they're going to be on Facebook at a specific time and they're a specific kind of person. But what about that sort of part of you that says, you know what, like people are probably just in a different mood on a Thursday before Good Friday. Maybe it's an opportunity to do something that creatively looks like this or creatively feels like that. So how do you get that blend of kind of, especially when you're planning media and how you're going to execute stuff, that blend of sort of gut and data? Because sometimes the data can be totally wrong as well. You know, you look just before an Easter weekend, you think that this is going to be the time to promote Easter eggs. By Thursday, maybe it's too late to promote the Easter eggs, but your gut is telling you, you know what, maybe we need to go with this. How do you kind of balance that out when it comes to planning for seasonally? Because you yourself are still a South African, and a lot of the data we're getting is informed by kind of these massive overseas tech companies. So how do you strike that balance?
So I think it is really understanding what the brand purpose is and what the brand or product means to your audience, right? What is the relevance of the specific occasion or specific holiday for the South African market? And what does it mean in terms of I'm going to say, go back to the 4 Ps in terms of, your product, ensure that it is really relevant for the occasion. Not everything is a match, right? So I think if you look at, for example, the telcos that is so prominent during the summer, their summer campaigns, they've actually created, I'm going to say, their own category occasion to drive messaging and specific purchases. So it's really ensuring the relevance, and then understanding your audience, and really determine what is driving that consumer behavior, and it's matching those two. But then also understanding like what is the real benefit for the marketer. Consumers might be more eager to spend and overindulge during a specific occasion. In Afrikaans, we've got the saying, as het paprien moet jy skep, which is pretty much loosely translated to, if the opportunity arises, make sure that you are there, and if it can help you to move forward, then don't let it pass you. So I think it's really understanding what is the benefit to the brand and what is the benefit to the marketer. Valentine's, Easter is synonym with chocolates. Our summer is synonym with traveling and holidays. So make sure that there's a relevance to the brand before implementing.
I'm glad that you raised sort of South Africa's marketing community almost doing that for themselves. The telcos, no one gets more excited about a telco TVC than a creative director at a lead agency, because they know that this is going to be the best 3 to 5 day shoot of the year, and we're going to blow money fast on this. But it kind of lends itself to some of the questions coming through on the live chat. And this is a question from Jay that I'm going to pose to you, Lebo. Jay says, with the volatility of the last few years, COVID, etc., have you seen that seasonal marketing has become harder to plan for? So, for instance, summer campaigns are planned for far in advance, but then there's recent lockdowns, which throw havoc into that. I think what I'm asking is, have seasonal campaigns planning become a little more shorter planned so that brands are able to pivot?
I definitely think so. I think the main approach, right, would be to look at obviously the previous data, right? What can we expect? Summer behaves like this, winter behaves like this. There's certain sort of peaks and troughs. However, you also want to look at like things like social listening. That gives you a really good sense of the sentiment right now around a particular type of season. So maybe this year, Christmas is not feeling very festive. And you want to sort of, really adjust your strategies for the current sentiment, the current trend around a particular season. And there's certain things we can't plan for. I mean, if you think about the lockdown, I don't think anyone actually foresaw that there was going to be this upsurge in pineapple sales and yeast. Like we didn't see, you can't plan for certain things. You need to be really tactical and also basically just be opportunistic and like have your teams there ready to come up with some really inspiring stuff to speak to a particular tactical or sentiment change. But I think if you use those two approaches of looking at the previous data, there is stuff that you can plan for, but then using a different type of data, which is like social listening, that really gets into that granular detail about what people are really thinking right now, and then sort of change those types of messagings to just be a little bit more relevant.
Mongezi, you want to build on that?
I definitely do. I think one of the things that we keep noticing more and more is that this idea of a seasonal or month-long calendar is falling out the window more and more. So there's a lot of agility that brands need to adopt, and that some brands have adopted over time, where that I think this is what you do in January, that's what you do in February, there's a winter campaign, there's a spring campaign, and all of that. Because things are changing so rapidly, both brand and agency teams need to be on speed dial all the time and be willing to change that messaging and that communication as the time hits. And I think to Label's point, there are things that we could not have planned for. And with COVID, or during COVID, a lot what we realized is that people started using seasonal campaigns or seasons such as Black Friday, where in the past we thought, okay, I'll buy that TV or that tablet or that phone on Black Friday when it's on special. People started buying basics like groceries on Black Friday, and these are things that we couldn't have foreseen going in. And now that you are there and you realize that actually people are buying groceries in bulk at that time and not buying tablets, some of the things that you can almost immediately change are your social campaigns and others that are not in print and catalogs that have gone out. So you need to be agile and be willing to change as quickly as a brand as people change in real time. That's one of the things that we've noted and we keep noticing.
Deadlines. Oh, the print press is not going to be happy with that. Krista, you want to build on that?
Yeah, I think a key thing that Mongezi said is obviously to be agile. But I think what is key is that as a brand, you cannot wait, until the day before Black Friday to realize, oh, Black Friday, let me just quickly get the message out there. I think it's important that your brand is already part of their repertoire, and that they understand, what is your purpose, what do you stand for, what is your positioning, before Black Friday. You cannot sit and wait for just hopping onto these occasions. Ensure that consumers are aware.
Krista's coming into bat with the always on. You can see she's there. she's ready to roll with that always on.
Recency campaigns.
Tanika, I want to come to you. This is a question from Potela, and it's interesting because Krista raised this a little early on, and she spoke about the clutter, because every single chocolate brand is thinking, well, Easter's a big thing for me, which means that actually there's so much clutter around Easter that how are you going to get your message out there sort of truly outside of kind of creative that's a little bit differentiated? Potela says, basically, why don't we just throw the baby out with the bathwater? Why can't advertising just defy seasonal norms? Why not advertise a bikini during a cold front and see if there's a spike in holiday bookings to sunny areas? Do you think that there's some merit in being the one brand that doesn't do what's predictable?
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? And I think it all always goes back to like what is actually authentic to your brand. Krista spoke a lot about link, and I know earlier before we started this webinar, we were like, okay, we're doing something, we're having a conversation about something really specific versus like talking purpose. But at the end of the day, you can't even have a conversation about a tactical seasonal campaign without acknowledging the fact that you should have a brand purpose and stay true to that brand purpose, and it should be the guiding light on making discerning decisions around where you do play. And if that means going against the grain and going against the norm and testing and learning and doing things that are different from what your competitors are doing, but aligned to your brand and what your brand stands for, then I see nothing wrong with that. I also think it's a good opportunity to gather data when you do test and learn. Everyone spoke about the importance of using your data. I call it date your data, like fall in love with that data and use it to make certain decisions. And that gives you an opportunity to test something that may not necessarily be a category table stake, but allows you to learn and see if there's any shift in consumer dynamics based on like real life examples. So I think, there's bravery in doing that, but also there's some robustness in it because you're doing something that goes against the tried and tested.
And speaking of going against the tried and tested would be retail and in-store experiences and people going to a shop and buying something and going to the checkout. It's very interesting to note over the past couple of weeks, a sort of supermarket brand that has become very strong on scooters, saying that it's cheaper for you to get your food scooted to you than it is for you to go to the actual store. And it would be remiss of us to not address the online e-commerce element of all of this, because we're talking spring, summer, autumn, so on and so forth. But how do those seasons apply in a digital context? I mean, for me, over a long weekend, I have more time to sit and scroll an online store than I do during the week, but I don't really feel like going into a shop and having that sort of long experience. So there's this added lens of kind of online and e-commerce and seasons. And when we start looking at the intersection of online and seasons, where are brands kind of starting to land? And Lebo, I'll come to you first, just in terms of the added layer of e-commerce into sort of seasonal consumer behavior.
I think one of the interesting things around just the rise of e-commerce is that your customer experience and your UX has become very, very important. So it's not good enough to just have, here's my online store and here's the cart and purchase and buy, but the experience has become a little bit more sort of seamless. So you also see on the social space that there's a complementary rise in social commerce as well. So when you're having those leisure experiences on social and you're scrolling, now we're beginning to find that there's conversion touch points in that lifestyle content as well to make that purchase sort of transition a little bit more seamless. Where you're inspired, there's also like an opportunity to convert. So that customer experience is not just about what happens when I'm online, but it's also those acquisition strategies as well. And sort of making that sort of just coaxing you into buying throughout the entire journey. And that's become such an important factor because I think it's essentially we used to have, the offline experience and the digital experience were like very sort of separate, but we've seen there's a little bit of integration where, the same kind of specials or the same sort of types of comms and tone that you're seeing online, you're also seeing when you're getting into the offline spaces as well, just to create this nice sort of synergy of the entire journey. So it's just become that e-commerce, conversion, social commerce has just had to sort of plug into all parts of the marketing mix in order to make it feel really nice and seamless.
Well, Gezi, moving sort of into the final, I don't want to say final, because actually we're one quarter into 2022 and we're halfway through the first third of the second quarter. Anyway, before we know it, 2022 is going to be done. But as we move into kind of the remainder of the year, where do you kind of see the impact of seasonal strategies in an e-commerce and specifically in a digital space? And what are some of the opportunities that you can see arising out of that?
So the CX reports that we do as Roger Wilco reveals, for one, that year on year, people value customer experience on these platforms. Number one, so having a seamless customer experience in UX on your platform, as they were also mentioned, is very important, right? So firstly, customer experience is important, and what we've noticed is that there are some brands that start losing people or shoppers after they fill their carts and they're at the checkout stage when they see those delivery charges, because some brands have higher delivery charges than others. And as a consumer sitting at home or at the office shopping, you probably have 3 or 4 tabs for the same item open across different stores. And when you get to the checkout point, you realize how much brand A charges for delivery versus brand B, right? So if you are at a retail store and you're buying the same product, you don't have that luxury. So you can't compare these things there. So customer experience and having I want to call it almost an honest system is very important. And as we go into the remainder of the year, that's what I think brands need to start understanding, and having systems that almost are transparent in their e-commerce, because when the seasons hit, then the opportunity there is to stress test your system and learn quickly. So because of the volumes that you get, then you're able to understand customer behavior even more, or understand customer behavior better. So if it's Black Friday, which is in November, you then understand your customers better, but you don't apply those insights for December, which is just the next month for Christmas shopping, then you've lost an opportunity. So it's understanding your customer better, it's improving your systems, and it's also improving your system so much that when they're stress tested during these seasons, they're then ready for customers and ready for people to shop.
It's interesting talking about kind of the consumer experience online, because it does need to be more than just sort of visit my website and take a look. Lebo, just before I cross to Nico, because I know Nico's got an unrivaled in-person experience, which she's going to talk to us about in a second, but just close us out on this e-commerce lens.
There's this concept called neural marketing, right? So it's almost, think about like the traditional sales guy that just knows what the rebuttals are going to be and sort of has that finesse that he's developed through the years. And so neural marketing kind of just gives us that lens from a digital perspective, because I think Mwenyezi also mentioned that about, things sit in your cart and you've got this opportunity, this leisure that e-commerce gives you, where you can sort of do a bit of a comparison. I mean, I also have carts that I come back to day in and day out. I'm like, no, not today. Then you come back 2 weeks later, okay, now, but then it's gone, So there's also this little mental, these little mental factors when it comes down to digital shopping. And the data is so important because there's all these behavioral things, right? So that impact what we buy online and when we, push purchase and things like that we need to be factoring into those UX and CX experiences. And it's more than just the display ads that follow you around the internet, convincing you to just complete the cart. But it's also like the CRM stuff that we get afterwards that sort of make you feel better about, like, no, just purchase. It's okay. It's festive. Blow your money. So it's like these are all sort of mental and emotional cues that we need to sort of put into sort of our CX and UX strategies in order to speak to those emotional mental blockers that don't make us want to buy, or that make us want to buy more or less in particular seasons. So that neural sort of marketing is so important, because of just, you don't have the access to impulse like you would in a retail store. So there's a lot more work that actually has to go into getting people to sort of complete that purchase online.
And Taniko, this is great news for you because it means that retail will consistently continue to thrive no matter how digital the world gets. Because, I mean, I was at the V&A waterfront over the weekend and walking around, you've got the guy performing outside, you've got everyone on the Ferris wheel, you've got the guy yelling that you need to go on the helicopter ride, you've got the music pumping out of the sunglass hut. You're like, it's the sensorial experience that you're like, I want to be kind of a part of this. And then before you know it, you've gone to the food court, you've bought more food than you thought you were going to buy, you've bought something at a shop that you didn't realize that you even needed. So it's very much around this consumer experience. It's something about in-person will always remain that kind of in-person element, but it is up to those who construct that in-person environment to make it as engaging as possible with Ferris wheels and performers and loud music and so on and so forth. Just land us out before we kind of go to closing thoughts on this e-commerce versus in-person seasonal kind of discussion. Because no one nails in person better than you guys do.
Stop. Firstly, it's great to know you were here. That's good. I hope you spent some money. Yeah, I mean, I think for the waterfront, experience is everything. We focus. I mean, earlier I spoke a lot about how we've got all these multiple propositions. You can live here, work here, eat here, shop here, But a lot of our focus is on what happens in the spaces between the buildings. And that's really all about the experience that you get once you're at the waterfront, beyond just that one singular mission, which might be to buy something. Our intention is to keep you here by driving dwell time because of all these like mini experiences that we stage. We also think about things in a macro level. We are privately owned, but we operate as a public space. So there's a big focus on placemaking, which is simply the practice of making you feel like you belong. Like this is a place where you feel safe, you feel like you can thrive, and you feel like you totally belong. And what we found more and more of is people still need that, like, it's just the human need to have social connection. And a place like the waterfront does offer that. And what we found from a retail perspective is that retailers that may have started online are now also looking into bricks and mortar as an extension of their e-commerce experience, because there is still that human need for just like, can I speak to someone? Recently, we were having a conversation about, like, you know how in malls you have information desks, and we're thinking of digitizing some of those services. But we know that there is still a need for just to speak to someone, because what we found is people often default to speaking to the security guards or the cleaners to find out, where do I need to go? So while there's a role for like digitizing a part of the experience, there is still a role for that just basic human interaction. Is there a face that I can talk to? Are there people around me that I can engage with? That's how we've created our experience, and that's how we create connections.
This is exactly why Yuppie Chef just recently sold the amount of money that they did, because of that cross combination of online and in-store. Well, it's been an incredible conversation this morning. Let's take some closing thoughts on using seasonal strategies to generate income. Krista, I'll come to you first, just with a final sort of thought or two around using the seasons to make money.
Yeah, I think just in terms of obviously the benefit for marketers, consumers are more eager to spend, they overindulge. Occasion can be used to cement the brand positioning, drive purposeful content and messaging. But then also I think just occasion strategies should be used for a longer term view. So yes, it might be a quick fix in terms of a quick sales promotion, but then, how can we extend it and have a positive knock-on effect throughout the year? Is it about the first party data that we actually gather throughout the promotion, for example?
Mongezi, closing thoughts?
I think one of the biggest things that we've noticed that we are growing on, and that brands are at least also understanding, is that seasonal marketing starts long before the seasons. And that understanding people or your customer prior to this seasonal marketing is very important. So use every little bit of customer data that you can get, be it first party data or engagement data, to one, drive awareness around the brand outside of the seasons, and then use this seasonal these seasons to then understand shopper habits, to stress test your systems, and to further add to what you know about the shopper, about the customer, and put them first, because that is what will make that particular brand or your messaging unique to the kinds of people you're targeting.
Lebo, blink once if you got the Easter brief a week before, blink twice if it came 6 months before.
I think I got it sometime last year. So
oh, good. That's good.
I think my main point would be, for brands that are a little bit brave, try and start your own seasons or your own trends, right? Because there is this opportunity to, what is necessarily like sort of a seasonal sort of marketing or increase in sales? It's just a mass perception of what we need to be buying at a particular point in time. So there is an opportunity for brands to just take a nondescript time of the year and just sort of brand it in a particular way to create this sort of trend and user behavior around a particular product. Think about something like the pumpkin spice latte. It's an autumn thing, like why, in America, but like any brand can basically just creatively just take a time of the year, create some sort of trend or sort of user behavior, inspire people to do something and just own it, So for those times when there's like a lot of clutter in particular types of seasons, there's also an opportunity for you to just take ownership of another time of the year and do something really special that your brand, your customers can get behind, and something that you can own.
So your answer takes me back to my youth when my mother was obsessed with the Edgar's Red Hanger sale, and we would go to the Cresta shopping center and wait outside, and then they would open the doors and everyone would flock inside. And I distinctly remember that as being the Red Hanger sale.
Exactly.
So yes, I think that's fantastic advice. But again, it requires a little bit of bravery, which is possibly what one should take away from this call. Tanyiko, take us home. Seasonal marketing, you're in the city where, like you said, it's 4 seasons in one day. So how do you get the best out of that? And how do you generate income and revenue and deliver on KPIs with seasonal marketing strategies?
I have a slightly different view. Well, actually, it kind of articulates what we've all said. Is it's great to capitalize on these seasons, but you don't have to. You really don't. I think it's important to be really judicious and discerning about where you place your messaging, and in the context where your competitors are driving a message around sell, 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 you might be positively conspicuous in your absence. Whatever you do, don't compromise on your brand values, and do so. And whatever you do so with compassion. Understand what is the consumer sentiment out there. How are people feeling? Are they cash strapped? Are we really doing the right thing by trying to push a buy when we know that people are struggling? So whatever we do, let's do it with some empathy and compassion, and do it in the right way for the brand and our customers.
Fantastic. Well, on the brink of winter and in the midst of hardcore load shedding, it's been an incredible conversation this morning as we discussed seasonal strategies, the impact of spring, summer, autumn, and winter on advertising, live with our panel. Speaking of which, our panelists this morning were Mongezi Mtati, lead brand strategist at Roger Wilco, Lebo Muerane, social and digital lead VML YNR, Tanyiko Maigeza, Executive Head of Marketing at the V&A Waterfront, and Krista Kruger, Chief Operating Officer of Wavemaker. Thank you so much. If you missed any of this, it's all available on demand on the Arena platforms or on the Red Zone portal, which is on the Financial Mail. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day further, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Cheers.